For thousands of years, indigenous people in North America lived in harmony with nature. They did this by embedding their traditional belief that they were part of nature and all life on the planet in their values, their customs, their language, and their life ways. This meant they would nourish and protect one another and also the earth, because their well-being was interdependent with the well-being of others and the earth. Indigenous economist Rebecca Adamson is a trailblazer. She's established local and global financial institutions and investment models that strengthen the financial independence and sovereignty of Native Americans.
I already knew that the economic models we were looking at carried their own values, and that our values were different, and that culture was our strength, not our weakness. Because this was back in the days where everybody knew Indians couldn't do business because we shared too much and we cooperated. It seemed to me like those were good things, and that businesses could be successful by sharing and cooperating. It's not that Indian people can't do business. It's they don't value profit over community. They don't value profit over life.
Tetewi Means holds degrees in environmental engineering and human rights law and is currently executive director of Thunder Valley Community Development Corporation on Pine Ridge Reservation.
We really believe, and I really believe, that what we have to be working for is a balance in all things, in the way we think, in the way we act, in our relationships to one another and the earth. And so that's what we're actively fighting for here, is a restoration of that balance.
Weezy Pan Little Elk has a BA from Yale University and a law degree from the University of Arizona. He served in various roles in the U.S. Department of Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington, D.C., before returning home to the Rosebud Reservation.
Buffalo were everything to us. They were our economy. They were our source of food, shelter, clothing, spiritual items. The Wolakota Regenerative Buffalo Range is a 28,000 acre buffalo range that will be home to 1,500 animals. It will be the largest Native American owned and managed buffalo herd in the world.
With a degree in health administration, Matt Wilson found his passion in the indigenous food sovereignty movement, which helps people to feed themselves in ways that are ecologically sound, nutritious, and independent of wasteful and unhealthy corporate food production and distribution systems.
So we're here at Kewak Ball Gardens, which is a 1 acre teaching and production farm. So we do a lot of mixed vegetable production, and we do a lot of egg production as well. We have some hens out here. And our goal was originally to teach the community how to grow their own food. And so over the years, we've kind of scaled up from doing like raised bed gardening to, full rows, and just increase our food production, because we know there's people here in our community who are hungry today.
The well-being of indigenous people and the earth was disrupted by Western colonizers. They used brutal and inhumane efforts that separated indigenous people from their culture, their history, and language, separated them from the land, and imposed economic practices that have proven to be so much less equitable and sustainable.
One of the most pivotal movements that pushed us to where we're at was the implementation around early 1900, 1910, 1915, was the federal government, along with the help with different churches, different denominations, came to our reservation with the sole mission to educate our children in Western settler colonial education in English. That was a moment in our history that has impacted us and is still impacting us now.
In the 1950s, the transracial adoption program was created by the federal government, and hundreds of children removed, and then the government trained the states how to do that, and so thousands of children were removed from their families. No due process, no court hearings. Today, we still have the worst disproportionality in foster care placement. 17% of the children in Alaska are Native Alaskan or Alaska Native, and 60% of the children in foster care system.
At one time, in 1800, we had 60 million plus buffalo in the Great Plains area. They were vast, they were abundant, and they were the lifeblood for the people that lived in this part of the world. Through very specific policies, there was an intentional effort by the government to wipe out the buffalo. The reason was buffalo were everything to us. People understood that if buffalo were taken away, that our ability to be self-sufficient would no longer exist, and we would be forced to come on to reservations and be forced to be reliant upon the government. And what happened is that by 1900, there were less than 1,000 free roaming buffalo. We went from 60 million plus to less than 1,000 in 100 years.
Indigenous people own 5% of this country's land base. Globally, Indigenous people own 28% of the Earth's land surface. The amount of resources, and 80% of the biodiversity is on our land. We should be the richest people around by economic law. So what is this if it's not the fact that our assets are taken, converted into cash for them, or the benefit of the asset is derived and directed to them?
The philosophy that guides all of the efforts of these change makers and others in healing the earth, promoting social and economic equity, and restoring their sovereignty is the seventh generation principle.
So our 7-gen vision really started off with the idea of what kind of world we want to see in the next 7 generations.
For us, the process is really simple, is act in the best interests of your great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren. It is make moral and ethical decisions that place the good of the group above the good of the individual. And finally, it's make decisions using complex decision models.
Our greatest threat right now is social inequality and climate change. And so what do we need to be doing differently in order to make sure we have a vibrant and thriving world for the next 7 generations? And we've kind of talked about generations being about 25 to 30 years, and so we're having to think 175 years into the future. I think for us, we're thinking about, what does energy look like for us? What does our housing look like? What does education look like? Where are we getting our food from?
To reclaim control of their assets and to break the cycle of poverty imposed upon them, Indigenous people need access to capital and technical assistance.
Indian man that was getting his master's degree in economic development, and I started talking to him, and he created this informal sector study, and he went out and basically the question was, what do you do to make money? And he began looking at 83% of the households earned about 87% of their income from these informal activities. They made coffins for the cemetery, they welded crosses for the cemetery, they mended fences, they did hair, they babysat, they sold lunches to the Indian Health Service or the Bureau of Indian Affairs people. There was 118 vibrant activities that were being done every day to make money, and I was like, that's it. That's it. And it was just all there, all of it in front of us, all this creativity, entrepreneurship. They needed, in some cases, very small loans, $500 loans, $2,000 loans. Really and truly is the story behind the Lakota Fund.
There's always been that underground economy, but in some ways with the formation of Lakota funds and providing that access to business loan capital, it kind of formalized us.
Home ownership is another vital component of financial independence. One of Thunder Valley's 8 initiatives is housing and home ownership. Both the Thunder Valley Community Development Corporation and Lakota Funds operate robust housing initiatives and education programs to help people become owners of homes designed for environmental sustainability.
On our 34 acres, we have a regenerative community development. It's one of our 8 initiatives. Our broader goal for this community is to be net zero.
Food sovereignty is another vital component of independence. Indigenous changemakers understand that food must be produced in a way that restores the environment rather than depleting it. Although it's a process known today as regenerative agriculture, it is actually, in fact, an ancient indigenous way of farming.
Regenerative agriculture is approaching food systems and food production from the point of longevity, of being able to be adaptable and not working against the land and nature, but actually being a part of it, working within it. So we can have the longest run of success, not just for ourselves who are producing food and implementing the food systems, but for the land itself, that the land is also being provided with benefits from our practices on the land.
And so having to balance the needs of like people are hungry now, but also trying to create systems that are more sustainable and more future thinking. And so the way we do that is to increase local food access, is to increase the amount of tribal food producers. And so we've started a farmer training program, really geared at getting people ready to start their own food production.
Underlying every single thing these change makers are doing is education. In order to restore their culture, they know they must relearn their own language, history, values, and life ways.
Positive Indian Parenting is an 8-lesson curriculum. The first lesson is asked people to examine where they learn to parent. And if you learn to parent in boarding school, or if you're learn to parent from people who were raised in boarding school, you didn't get a chance to learn the rich traditions that teach that children are sacred beings, the storytelling, the use of cradle boards, the nurturing practices, the lullabies. We've been doing some exciting work in Alaska in the last 5 years. We've been trying to reduce that disproportionality rate, so that the number of Native kids being lost to the state foster care system is reduced, and that children can stay in their own villages. And we now have villages where there hasn't been a foster care placement outside the village in 5 years.
The foundation of our school is Wotakuye. That's our kinship system. And all of our kids here, we refer to each other by relative terms. That means that we're good to each other, we look out for each other, and we take care of each other. And every day that we remind them that, but that isn't just us, it's everything. We take care of the earth, we take care of the plants, the animals, and our things that we have because they come from the earth.
Our language is embedded with our lifeways and our spirituality. We have a kindergarten through first grade total immersion classroom. We are designing a truly Lakota total immersion school.
The ultimate goal is to get our kids to be intermediate fluent in Lakota. We're going to speak our language, and we're also going to learn, our academics, and we're going to learn our social skills, so that way we sustain our fluency. But we also start to take back our space. We start to take back our space that always had belonged to us.
So they're really taking what they've learned here about healthy eating habits, but also like cultural eating habits. So they're yearning for buffalo meat, they're yearning for deer and elk, they're yearning for those berries. So they want their families to go out and forage, they want their families to hunt. And so their wants and needs are really transcribing to their families. And I'm hoping, all of that together, we really become a healthy nation. Because we know the statistics of our chronic diseases, our mortality rates, the food apartheid. We know those stats. So how are we working with our kids to really change those? Because they're the future.
We still have to meet state standards to be qualified as a school. So testing-wise, they're in all of their things, reading, math, science, they're all testing at least 1 grade level ahead, which is amazing. But it all comes back to what they're learning.
My vision is that we're going to have a whole bunch of change makers, coming about from the school as they see and learn from a different lens.
I just want to urge people throughout the world to make sure we're inviting diverse voices, including Indigenous voices. It's not so much just being able to hear us, but it's also so much to making sure that we're considered leaders in this work.
I can't hammer home enough the approach that we're taking, like with not just Thunder Valley, but in the food sovereignty movement overall on the reservation, that concept of being a good relative, not just to one another, but to the land and producing our foods.
You know, the transformation that we're trying to effectuate in our community really is this transformation of healing to hope to liberation. Because once you start on your healing journey, you're able to heal from historical traumas, from existing traumas, ongoing traumas. You're able to find hope again. Hope that life can be better, that life can be different. You can start to dream again and vision about the possibilities. And that's when you start to transform your mindsets to this liberated way of living.